English in Quito, Ecuador. This is From the South, and I am Sweeney Gray. The Venezuelan government is debunking foreign media's fake news coverage of the Venezuelan migration in the region. Vice President Delcy Rodriguez and Communications Minister Jorge Rodriguez have also condemned xenophobic attacks against Venezuelan migrants. According to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Venezuela is the second most popular country in South America for migrants to head to and has some of the lowest numbers of immigrants in South America.
There has been an attempt by some governments from the Lima Group that messed with the Security General of the Organization of the American States, destroying the little credibility the organization has, and now they're trying to do the same thing with the United Nations.
It is disgusting to see how the centers of power in Peru, Ecuador, and Colombia have tried to seed fear to promote hate crimes against citizens from a country that has received their population. 5,600,000 Colombians in Venezuela have received food, education, healthcare, housing. We haven't put them in any shelters. If they say there is a humanitarian crisis in Venezuela, why these Colombians do not flee our country?
Meanwhile, Venezuelans in Peru want to benefit from the Return to the Homeland plan. Hundreds of Venezuelans are chanting, "We want to leave," outside the Peruvian embassy. They're asking the government to send them back to Venezuela.
We want to go back fast. There are Venezuelans here that are in the streets without food. We want to go back as soon as possible. I have small kids. Yes, we made a mistake to come here, but we want to go back.
Argentina has announced more austerity measures to help stabilize the troubled economy. President Mauricio Macri laid out the changes in a televised address. More than half of the government ministries will be cut. Plus, there will be stiff taxes on exports to reduce budget deficits. This comes after last week's dramatic collapse of the currency.
We know that it's a bad tax, which goes against what we want to promote. We want to promote more exports to generate more quality work in every corner of Argentina. But I have to ask you to understand that this is an emergency, and we need your support. I have made the decision to reduce the number of ministries to less than half of what we have now. Governments have different moments, and in each moment they require different teams.
Finance Minister Nicolas Dujovne says the government wants to achieve fiscal balance by 2019. Dujovne will travel to Washington to meet the head of the International Monetary Fund, Cristina Lagarde, on Tuesday. Argentina signed a $50 billion loan with the IMF.
In 2019, we want to reach the primary fiscal balance, before interest, of course. Then in subsequent years, we will increase that result to also cover, with the primary surplus, the payment of interest on the debt, and already have a financial equilibrium.
Our correspondent in Buenos Aires, Edgardo Esteban, has more.
President Mauricio Macri has announced new measures to face the economic crisis. The government will cut down on the number of ministries in less than half in order to stabilize public spending and reduce the deficit. However, this will lead to massive layoffs. In the agro-industry ministry, 560 workers have lost their jobs in the past 24 hours. He also announced a tax on exports as an emergency measure to balance the accounts of the state. He said these were the worst 5 months of his administration after the country's currency has crashed to record lows. Finance Minister Nicolás Dujovne also announced other policy changes. He also said he will travel to the United States to hold meetings with the IMF to renegotiate new economic agreements in relation with the $50 billion standby finance loan they got from the financial institution.
We continue in Argentina, where the former president, Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner, reappeared in court on Monday. Fernandez must testify about an alleged corruption network discovered during her term. So far, 12 businessmen and high-ranking officials linked to the case have been arrested. Fernandez has denied any wrongdoing. She has also denounced this as the political persecution of her. Brazil's vice presidential candidate Fernando Haddad has visited the former president Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva in Curitiba. Haddad wants to define the Workers' Party strategy after the electoral Supreme Court banned Lula from running for the presidency. The PT insists Lula is its candidate, although Haddad could replace him. The electoral court has banned any campaign ad in which Lula appears. Brazil has lost some of its most precious historical artifacts after a huge fire swept through the National Museum. Firefighters battled through the night to control the blaze in the Boa Vista neighborhood of Rio de Janeiro. The museum had just celebrated its 200th anniversary. Its collection includes almost 20 million items. The fire so far has been dampened.
We worked here on education with different groups from around the world. It's a loss. I'm without words.
It's a loss for the world. This can never be recovered for the people, for the building. There is no way to get it back. Thankfully, no one died, but the loss can never be recovered.
Social movements in Mexico have organized over the weekend to reject the sixth and final annual report by the Enrique Peña Nieto administration. The demonstration ended outside the same parliament building where the new left-wing majority legislature has been sworn in.
Teachers from the Education Workers Union took to the streets of Mexico City to condemn once again President Peña Nieto's education reform. As the outgoing government delivered its last annual report, they called on President-elect Andrés Manuel López Obrador to include the unions in preparing a new kind of education.
We want to tell Peña Nieto that his education reform has failed. In spite of his attempts to remove our rights and our job security, it has failed.
With Mexico's 64th Congress beginning its work, social movements outside drew attention to the dire state of the public health service.
They admit us to hospital in chairs, on the floor. There are no medicines, no gas. Once there was no machine to check my heart.
Inside the Congress, the new session was underway. For the first time, there is a left-wing majority in Parliament, led by Morena and its ally, the Party of Labor.
I think that on July 1st, Mexicans punished the PRE and Peña Nieto for a series of failures in investigations against corruption over the president's White House, Odebrecht, and the terrible case of the 43 disappeared Ayotzinapa students.
It is the first time that the people are fully represented in this sovereign body. 308 members of the coalition, almost two-thirds together with the new president. We will make history. It's a big responsibility.
They will have their work cut out. They'll need to review the raft of neoliberal reforms passed by the previous Congress, where the PRI, now reduced to the third party in Congress, approved changes to the Constitution in relation to energy, education and the banks. They will also have to create a new Ministry of Public Security and approve a new Attorney General.
Bolivia's President Evo Morales and his Peruvian counterpart, Martin Vizcarra, are heading a binational summit in the Bolivian city of Cobija. The two leaders will discuss the construction of the bi-oceanic train and the cleaning of Lake Titicaca. With the summit, the two countries also expect to strengthen ties and cooperation in the development of the Amazonian region. Our correspondent in Bolivia, Freddy Morales, has more details.
The president of Bolivia, Evo Morales, and the president of Peru, Martin Vizcarra, have finished the four binational cabinet in the Bolivian city of Cobija. From the year 2015, this cabinet raises solutions to the problems of its extensive common border of about 1,200 kilometers. The ministers of both states also met during the weekend. The heads of states have reviewed previous agreements and also signed new ones. The project of a bioceanic train stood out. This train would join the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean with a corridor that will pass through Bolivia in an extension of almost 3,700 kilometers. It will demand almost $14 billion of investment. They also discussed security issues, integration, economic development, and environment. The two countries share Lake Titicaca, the highest navigable lake in the world.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again in a minute.
order has always subjugated the masses. But who are the actors behind every move? What are their real interests? We analyze every move on Critical Move. Weekdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Thousands of supporters of the Nicaraguan government have marched in the capital, Managua. The rally came a day after the United Nations Human Rights Mission left the country. The government said everything has returned to normal after 5 months of political crisis. Anti-government demonstrators also marched in Managua. 2 people were injured when cars were burnt and several roads were blocked. Maria Jose Diaz has more from Managua.
Thousands of Nicaraguans took to the streets of Managua on Saturday as a show of support for families who have lost loved ones in the violence that has marred the country since April. Nicaraguan and FSLN flags covered the streets. Marchers held the pictures of those who have lost their lives this year. Marchers were calling for peace on the streets and justice for the hundreds of victims of the opposition violence, as well as for the damage caused all over the country. Marches like this took place all over the country in support of the Sandinista Front for National Liberation. Opposition members also held marches against the government, but they turned violent as some marchers set fire to a police car and attacked security officials. There were also hooded people holding rifles, rocket launchers and Molotov cocktails riding around in pickup trucks with no license plates. The National Police has said they are investigating the people behind this violent march. They say they will use all their resources to serve justice and protect lives of Nicaraguans.
And the Nicaraguan police released an official statement condemning the attack on police officers by armed and hooded men. According to the statement, 2 policemen were attacked outside the highway, on the highway outside Masaya. One of them sustained serious injuries. The attackers also set fire to the police truck. Costa Ricans have protested the arrival of Nicaraguans who are fleeing violence in their country. This is the 2nd march against Nicaraguans in as many weeks. Hundreds have marched on San Jose saying they do not want Nicaraguan migrants coming into the country. They say there are not enough jobs for those arriving.
So they're allowing people to enter when we have a high unemployment rate? It's common sense. If we have a high unemployment rate, then why are thousands of people coming in and there's no source of work? What's going to happen to these thousands of people? They will commit crimes and create social chaos.
Thousands of members of the Catholic and evangelical churches in Guatemala have marched against the decriminalization of abortion. They've also protested against homosexuality. They say the, quote, natural family needs to be protected. Congress is currently discussing a bill that could approve jail sentences of up to 4 years for women who have suffered miscarriages. The law could also increase punishments for those undergoing an abortion. And the government of Guatemala is being criticized after refusing to protect human rights defenders. An independent investigation shows thousands of people are being criminalized.
During a meeting in the municipality of Santa Cruz de Verapaz, these people chose to serve as human rights defenders for their communities.
A human rights defender is every person who stands up to defend their land, their people's rights, be they economic, political, social, or environmental.
Defenders say they have voluntarily taken this role after facing a ruthless capitalist model that attacks their people. They say their roles are recognized by the United Nations.
We work under a United Nations resolution. We are recognized internationally as human rights defenders. From the moment we started fighting for communal and independent rights, we became defenders.
The Guatemalan government is a signee of UN Resolution 53/144, which officially recognizes and protects human rights defenders. But social organizations say this agreement isn't being upheld.
They do not want to do their part. People within the government, even at high levels, demonize human rights defenders and put our lives in danger.
The Human Rights Defenders Network of Guatemala say that over 6,000 defenders are suffering some form of criminalization.
Big businesses are leading this criminalization campaign. They see us threatening their economic interests, so they are allied with the state who provides them with the services of the police and the public ministry.
Between May and July of this year, 8 human rights defenders were murdered, as the UN has deemed the situation for campesinos in Guatemala as alarming.
A group of environmentalists have condemned an attack against them in Mexico. They say the attack occurred when they were trying to plant trees in an ecological reserve in the state of Chiapas. About 500 people were threatened by an alleged paramilitary group that wanted them to leave the area. Environmentalists say the authorities do not do enough to protect them. And the former Chilean president, Michelle Bachelet, has taken office as the new UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. Bachelet says she will do everything possible to support victims and human rights defenders. In her first statement as High Commissioner, she has called on Myanmar to free the 2 Reuters journalists jailed on Monday. Insects may be the way to solve food shortages in Mexico. So far, those who have already eaten them say that they are small and crunchy delights.
This kitchen works non-stop preparing dishes with ingredients that date back to the pre-colonial era. Insects and larvae, which for a long time were eaten only by the indigenous people, have started to make their way into recipes.
I didn't eat them before, but after trying them I can say they are good. This is traditional cuisine. Insects are a delight.
Consuming these delicacies falls in line with Mexican cuisine. Tortillas accompany larvae and red worms simmered with garlic and chile. Chef Rigoberto says anyone can learn how to cook them.
At first we thought it would be hard to cook, but we learned it's actually quite simple.
Traditionally, grasshoppers are collected in the fields of southern Mexico, but they are starting to be bred in the city, to be used as an alternative for healthy eating and to protect the environment.
For a kilo of protein from red meat, you need 10 liters of water. For the same amount of protein from grasshoppers, you only use 1 or 2 liters.
Scientific studies show that there are 400 insect species in Mexico that can be consumed and are a good source of protein, but people look down on this food. This is why experts recommend people start eating them at a young age.
Children hold no prejudices, so through their instinct and curiosity, they will discover grasshoppers are quite tasty. Once you try one, you are hooked. They are delicious with some lime and a little chili.
According to the National Statistics Institute, over 24 million Mexicans live in famine conditions. It's worsened by the over-reliance on processed food with low nutritional value, which has displaced more complete and nutritional ingredients.
Residents from a town in El Salvador have set their streets on fire to celebrate the annual Fireball Festival. Participants pelt each other with rags drenched in gasoline, rolled into tight flaming balls. The festival commemorates a volcanic eruption that occurred in 1658. It is said that the hot lava that flowed from the volcano was actually the local patron saint, Jerome, fighting the devil with balls of fire. Trinidad and Tobago's Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley says the failed refinery at the state-owned oil company Petrotrin could be sold, and the union gets first preference. He made the announcement in a national address ahead of its closure, but the Prime Minister isn't happy with the union. He alleged that they had declined his invitation to sit on the board of Petrotrin to help with its restructuring. He also accused them of unnecessary work stoppages, which hampered productivity.
In taxes and royalties. But was the decision to...
The West Indian Day Parade has taken to the streets in Brooklyn, New York as part of the Labor Day holiday. The annual carnival celebrates the culture of several Caribbean countries from Trinidad to Jamaica. People have filled the streets with costumes and soca music. New York City is home to the largest Caribbean population in the world outside of the Caribbean itself. And we take a short break now. World News is next.
The Pakistani journalist Tariq Ali examines the mass media influence promoted by imperialism. Get access to the analysis of the socio-economic and political life of the whole South America on our screen and platform in English. A critical place committed to the truth to determine the major events that transform the world today. Mondays, only on Telesur.